Things have learnt to walk that ought to crawl. That is the new single from The Room. Just came out August 12th, and we are diving right in this week on Matt Connarton Unleashed here. Welcome, everybody. We are live from the studios of WMNH 95.3 FM in glorious Manchester, New Hampshire. And, of course, you can stream the show from anywhere. Go to mattconnerton.com/unleashed for all your live streaming options. But let's go ahead and bring in, we have Dave Jackson from The Room, all the way, great band from Liverpool, of course. And let's see, he's joining us via Restream. Let's see if he's there. Dave, can you hear us?
Hello, yeah. Can you hear me?
Absolutely. You sound great. Welcome to the program.
Okay, cool. Okay, yeah.
Love
Great
that.
to see you. Yeah.
Love that song. I'm anxious to talk to you. So interesting thing about The Room. Let's dive right into this part. So tell me if I have the timeline correct. You started the band in 1979. You were active. Yeah. You were active until 1985, and then reformed in 2022. And and I have to tell you, so we've had some bands on the show in the last couple of years that took really long breaks and then got back together. But this might be a record. 85 to 22. Yeah. That's a hell of a long time.
Well, Becky, who was the original bass player in The Room, was in the next band that we had that started in 85 and ran until 1990, which was Benny Profane. And then we had a band after that called Dust together, and they turned into a band called Dead Cowboys. And then I think Becky moved up to Ulverston, away from Liverpool, to brew beer for quite a while in 2000. And I did some stuff as Dave, under my own name, Dave Jackson. Then I did some stuff as Dave Jackson and the Cathedral Mountaineers. And then I got back together with a guy from the second version of The Room from about 84, 85, a guy called Paul Cavanagh.
Okay.
And we did 2 albums as The Room in the Wood from 2018 till 2020. And it was round about 2020 that Paul kind of decided he didn't want to do stuff anymore. And we were booked to play at a Shine On festival as The Room in the Wood. And I just started rehearsing with a new guitarist, Darren. And we had the idea of asking Becky to rejoin. And she brought her son in. And we decided that we'd had too many different names and we'd go out as The Room again. And Clive, our original drummer from 1980, who'd left the band in 83 and lived in Devon, which is the other end of the country, turned up at our first gig and offered to rejoin the band. Unfortunately, our original guitarist, who plays on the original version of Things Have Learned to Walk That Ought to Crawl, had died in the meantime. And so we've got kind of 3 of the 4 original members of the band in The Room currently. And the bass player's son, who wasn't even born when the original band began playing keyboards.
That's incredible. But so to have
kind of a potted history.
That's great. To have so much of the original band there, though, is really cool because, very, very often when it's a scenario like this where there's a long gap, between, and obviously you've done a lot of music in between. You've certainly been extraordinarily active over the decades. But very often when a band comes back that was around and say, that was active in the early 1980s, it might be one guy, right, from the band, or and they're just using the name. But in your case, you've got most of the band, and the one piece that's missing, you've got Becky's. You said it's Becky Stringer's son who's in the band with you.
He plays keyboards, but we've got a new guitarist, Darren, who's
gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
He was a fan of the band back in the day, apparently. But
perfect.
It was strange though, because just before we reformed The Room, I got asked to go and play in the Philippines and do only songs from the 80s Room version with Filipino backing bands, and I went over and did that in Manila with a couple of other 80s acts. When in Rome and H2O, I think they were. Yeah,
that's interesting. That sounds like a pretty interesting experience.
Yeah, it was. It was strange. Yeah. Apparently, we had a kind of unofficial hit out there. I think they used to bootleg stuff, and uh, a song "New Dreams for Old" apparently was very popular in the Philippines,
Oh,
which we didn't know anything about.
so then when you go there to play the show, I assume so the band that you're playing with there already exists. They already know the songs, and you just show up and play
Yeah,
them.
yeah, they're really good musicians, and they play a lot of kind of. They seem to have quite a thing about Liverpool bands because there's a guy out there, Paul Simpson out of the Wild Swans. I don't know if you come across them. He was in the original Teardrop Explodes as the keyboard player.
Okay.
He's really popular in the Philippines and goes out there.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's interesting. Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and the song. So I'm curious about the song. Things have learned to walk that ought to crawl. That was
Yeah.
that's an old song, right? But it's been revised. Is that correct? So that dates back to '82, the original version of that.
Yeah, the original version came out in 1982 on Red Flame Records. It was, which was an independent label that had bands like the Moodists and Ed Cooper's band, the Laughing Clowns, and stuff like that. And they eventually got kind of signed up by Virgin for a couple of years, as did The Room. But it was one of the few. It's one of two songs that we included in our live set because we mostly do new stuff. We're on our third new album with the Room.
Oh wow.
We have had people say, "Why don't you do some more old stuff?" So we are learning a few kind of old songs at the moment as well. But we concentrate on new stuff really.
Was there something about this song that made you think that it belonged more with the material that you're releasing now?
I think it was one of the songs that I always really liked anyway, and we kind of when we played this gig at kind of Shine On. It was our first gig with the new lineup.
Yeah.
We were using a drum machine, and Ethan had never played on stage with a band before in his life. In order to justify the fact that we were called The Room, we thought we should at least do one old Room song as well as the new stuff,
Yeah.
And that was one of the ones that we chose back then.
Okay. Okay. Interesting. What was that like playing with a drum machine for that show? Was that challenging?
Yeah, we'd been rehearsing with a drum machine, but the problem was that all the other bands were using live drummers, and they weren't actually turning the music in between bands down, to sound check.
Yeah.
So it was one of these things where you kind of almost had to sound check. So it was a bit hairy for Ethan, who'd never kind of done that kind of thing before.
Sure.
But it worked.
It worked out. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what's it like singing lyrics that you wrote, back, decades ago? I mean, is it strange at all? Is it surreal? Does it feel natural? Singing these lyrics that were written by a younger version of yourself.
Yeah. I mean, so I was probably about 23 when I wrote the lyrics or something like that. So yeah, it was very strange. But in some ways, I think because I learned the songs at, it was early on kind of thing, the songs have stuck in my head,
Mm-hmm.
But it was weird. The Philippines gig was weird because there were songs that I literally hadn't sung since 1985 or even earlier, because up until then, nearly every band that I'd had would be a new band, and we just do new material. We wouldn't really go back and go over old stuff. So we weren't like a tribute act to ourselves like a lot of bands.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Now tell me about Doom Pop. The album is called Doom Pop with an exclamation point. I'm really curious about it. I mean, it's a great title. But what is, and I feel like the term Doom Pop came up on the show recently during another conversation I had with a guest. Yeah. I feel like somebody else used that term Doom Pop, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. Yeah. And I'm curious about why you chose that for the album title.
I think it was just that our previous album was kind of was 11 songs that told a continuous story without any choruses or whatever, in 11 songs. And I kind of had this idea that we'd go back to our version of pop music, if you know what I mean, the post-punk kind of indie version of pop music. But the lyrics were all, well, a lot of the lyrics, like Drill Baby Drill and Continent of Lies and Drones and Doom Patrol, were all to do with that kind of rise of kind of fascism in our country and in yours at the moment.
Well, yes. Drill Baby Drill, of course, a very specific, we might play that at the end of our conversation, a clear reference to, I believe, Sarah Palin, who was the Republican vice presidential candidate in 2008, was the first one I ever heard say that. Yeah. Drill Baby Drill.
Well, there is that line, we got the line, I don't even like my grandkids. My grandkids, why should I care if the world has to die? It's the line.
Yeah. Well, that decides it for me. I'm definitely going to play that at the end of our conversation, because that is a great track. I like Continent of Lies too. I might sneak that in later too, because that one, I went through and listened to everything I could find, and I really love. The telling is interesting because, as you said, it tells a continuous story. But these songs too. I mean, they're very. They're very relevant to what's happening now. But Drill Baby Drill, so when did that come out originally? Or I shouldn't say when it came out originally, but when was that?
It out. It came out in April and we wrote it last year.
Oh, okay.
I mean, I think we Continent of Lies was a bit earlier because it was a song that we recorded when we did our first new LP, but it didn't get onto Restless Fate.
Okay.
So it's got a different drummer on it. It was before Clive rejoined us. And the lyrics it was kind of the way that Trump was kind of sucking up to Putin at the time, and also a response to January the 6th, the kind of, patriots and goons kind of thing.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right.
So it was kind of, I think I might have tweaked a few of the lyrics since, but because when we were doing the new album, I decided that it fitted in with it, and I kind of re-recorded the vocal and for it. Yeah.
Right. Right.
That's the way it came about. Yeah.
So I'm curious. I mean, not just within the context of the room, but because obviously you've made a lot of music, you've done a lot of different projects over the years. Has it always been a kind of a priority of yours lyrically to be addressing these kinds of issues? Have you always done that, or does it just kind of fit this project?
I think we did it with the room towards the end of our career. Really, there was songs that we did for that ended up on a John Peel session. They didn't actually come out on record until LTM re-released some of our back catalogue. That we had a song called "The Storm," and which was kind of about Thatcherism and stuff back then.
Yeah.
And Benny Profane had a song called "Rob a Bank," which had a line about. Which was to do with kind of, I'll tell you, we've played in America once in '81.
Okay.
And as we were leaving Liverpool, it was the week that the riots had broken out in Toxteth, which is right by where we lived.
Yeah.
So, that was a big influence on us back then. So it's always been in the background of our stuff. It's not an absolute priority of our music, but it comes out every now and again. Yeah, the political side of things. Yeah,
there's a certain, I was just thinking about, and I hadn't thought about this much before. It's occurring to me just now as we're talking about it. There's a certain Well, the part that I had thought about is there's a timelessness to your music in that it's the, what you're doing. It's the type of stuff that you could listen to, like a song like that, things have learned to walk that ought to crawl. If you played that for me and said, Matt, what year do you think this came out? I wouldn't be able to tell you because there's a timelessness to it. You know what I mean? It sounds like it could fit in any era, right. but it occurs to me now, not only does that apply, could you apply that to the production and the style of the song, but also the content, because when we're talking about these issues, they say, it's such a cliche, I almost hate to use it, but the more things change, the more they stay the same. Over the decades, because I'm old enough to remember. Well, let's just say I'm old enough to remember. And to notice that the names change, the players change, but the core things that we have to deal with, like authoritarianism and fascism and all of that, that doesn't change. That's always there. It ebbs and flows, but it never goes away.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think the first time I went to America, because Becky's had family out on the West Coast there, was 79. And I remember, it was mostly kind of California that we were in then. And I think it was when Reagan was kind of having problems with the air traffic controllers. And
yes.
It was all that kind of stuff was going on, trashing the unions and all that.
He fired them. Yeah. He fired all the air traffic controllers.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was pretty early in his administration, but yeah, I do, like, I'm just barely old enough to remember, but I do remember that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Crazy stuff. So, obviously, does making music about these things, is it cathartic for you? Does it help you to deal, because you're obviously someone who's thinking about them. So if you're thinking about these subjects, I assume you're also worrying about these subjects, because it's hard to think about them and not worry about them, unless you're a nihilist and you just say, well, none of it matters anyway. But I mean, does it help you? Is it, because I often think of music as a form of therapy. We create art about the things that, hopefully some of the things that make us happy, but we also create art about the things that bother us, right? So
I think so. I mean, I tend to write. I mean, I think that was also the Doom Pop was kind of a joke on the general theme of the stuff that I write as well.
Right.
Because even most of the songs, even if they have a kind of an upbeat tune, tend to have an undercurrent of kind of pessimism or whatever.
Yeah, as someone else.
I know the songs on the record. I mean, like one of the songs is inspired by Stalker, the film by Tarkovsky.
Oh, no kidding.
And another one, and another one is trying to condense the plot of 3 Bela Tarr films into 3 verses. Temptation Harbor. So yeah. Yeah.
Well, as someone else famously from Liverpool, I believe, once sang, some people want to fill the world with silly love songs, but we've got enough. But we've got enough of those. We've got enough of those. Is there, by the way? So being a band, so the band officially, I mean, you bill yourselves as being from Liverpool, correct? You're all from that area.
Yeah.
Is there like a pressure that comes with that? Because in America, there's certain cities that are just known for having a very strong musical scene. Where we are located, we're kind of close to Boston. Boston is known for that, the Boston scene, New York City, Austin, Texas, Nashville, Tennessee, of course. I mean, being from Liverpool, is there like a certain expectation that comes with that?
Well, maybe there was. I think it's kind of, I mean, I suppose the era that we started playing, Liverpool bands round about that point would have been with a kind of slightly more upbeat bands than the Manchester bands, in a sense.
Yeah.
If you're thinking kind of, you got Echo and the Bunnymen, Teardrop Explodes, Wahheat, or the Mighty War or whatever. And in Manchester, you've got Joy Division, The Fall, eventually the Smiths or whatever, and we always kind of seem to go down a bit better in Manchester.
Okay.
It's strange, Yeah. Although we played our first gig as the Room at Eric's, which was kind of the Liverpool punk kind of and post-punk kind of club.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, you get in where you fit in, and obviously, the Liverpool scene, especially like say end of the '70s into the early '80s when you guys were really getting going. I would imagine it was overcrowded, maybe a good way of putting it. I assume. I mean, obviously, I wasn't there, but just from what I know about it, I imagine it was like New York City is now. If you're a musician in New York City, you're you're in a very big pond.
I suppose so. Yeah, I mean, with the Room, we put out our first two albums, our first two singles ourselves, and a cassette album, which John Peel picked up on and kind of played on his show. Played 3 tracks or 4 tracks as a session, kind of thing, before he got us in to do, live sessions or whatever, and then we got signed by kind of Red Flame, and eventually we got signed by Virgin, and we got people like John Porter and Tom Verlaine, who was a kind of inspiration, television or whatever. Tom Verlaine produced half of our, what would it be, 3rd album kind of thing. In Evil Hour. Yeah. And we even got him to sing backing vocals on a song called Jackpot Jack. Yeah. So that was fun.
You reference, of course, releasing music on cassette and whatnot. Obviously, the music industry has changed so much over the years, but you've been active really the entire time, right? So have you been able to kind of, I would imagine it's easier for someone who's done a lot of different projects over the years to adapt to the changes in the industry versus someone who, because like I said, as I alluded to earlier, we've had recent artists on the show who stopped for a very long time, and then they're coming back in and they're like, whoa, it's a whole new world now with streaming and everything's so different. I mean, what's that experience been like for you?
Well, I mean, I suppose round about I didn't realize it, but round about 1993, I went back and did a degree, and then I did an MA and then a PhD, and I've been teaching at Liverpool John Moores University since about 2000, so I've got a job, kind of thing. And the band has become, it's something that I do as much for myself, and it's it's not, at the moment, it isn't a massive money making thing. It's kind of an expensive hobby, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. I do.
That everybody else has a source of income, and we're not relying on the band for our income.
Right.
And which kind of frees us up to do what we want. And also the band live all over the country. I mean, Becky still lives up in Ulverston, which is kind of, about a 2-hour drive north, and Clive lives something like a 4-hour drive south in Devon.
Yeah.
So we tend to meet up to rehearse before we play, and to record and stuff in Liverpool. But it's that's the way we do it.
Do you think?
Sorry.
Oh no, not at all. Do you think where your position is currently in the music industry, in terms of the band, do you think it's do you think streaming and everything is helpful? I mean, I would assume, in terms of connecting with younger audiences, and I'm sure obviously you've got people who've been with you for a long time, who have followed you for a long time, but I assume you're also able to more easily connect with younger audiences because of streaming. And as I said, the music you do is kind of timeless.
Yeah, I mean, I think, streaming and the internet helps. I mean, for instance, I wouldn't have gone, the whole Philippines thing came about via Facebook, as much as people trash it, and I can understand why, people are kind of down on certain types of social media. I wouldn't have been contacted by somebody in the Philippines to go and play a gig,
Exactly. Exactly. By the way, just to kind of circle back, because, we talked about the resurrection of the Room officially as an entity, but we didn't really talk about why I don't think we did anyway. Forgive me if I missed it, but in 1985, when the band stopped, and again, you were off to do other projects anyway, but I mean, why did the Room itself stop in 85?
Well, the Room was kind of almost two distinct bands from the kind of 79, 80 to late 82 was me and Becky, Clive, who's the current drummer, and a guy called Rob, who was the guitarist. And then we got in a keyboard player, Peter Baker. And then Rob and Clive decided they wanted to leave the band. And Peter introduced me to these two other guys, Paul Cavano, a guitarist who was a friend anyway, and his band had supported us a few times, and a guy called Alan Wills, who later ended up running Delta Sonic Records, who had the Zootons and the Coral and all that kind of stuff. But so they joined in 83, and that was when we got signed to a kind of major label. And what happened? They didn't want to play any of the old stuff, so we only played the new stuff that we'd written with the new members of the band.
Yeah.
And Alan experienced some kind of tragedy, family tragedy, and decided he wanted to leave the band. And Paul thought he might leave as well. And me and Becky decided to start a new band called Benny Profane. Which, yeah. It was a kind of, I think it was one of the things was that we got dropped by, even though we'd been signed by Virgin, we did, toured with Tom Verlaine and recorded, with him.
Yeah.
For some reason, Virgin decided to drop the independent label that we were on.
Oh, okay.
And then and they also kind of deleted the album.
Oh.
And they were holding it as ransom with the record, the indie label, over another artist or something like that.
Okay.
So we ended up having to put out some live sessions as an EP in the meantime.
Mm-hmm.
And then things just kind of fell apart. I think Paul wanted to be a singer in his own band, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And Alan was best mates with him. And they went off and they formed a band called Top, who were kind of part of that whole, they joined in on the back of that kind of Manchester thing, if you know what I mean.
So the album that you had recorded for the indie that was an imprint, I assume, on Virgin, was that shelved, or did that ever come out? Or
it came. It had already come out, but they just stopped making more copies.
Got it. Okay. I mean? Yeah. Okay.
They deleted it from from that point on.
Okay.
And I think the album came out eventually as a double album called Nemesis, with a kind of mini album we'd also done for them.
Oh, okay.
But that was a year after we'd already split up.
Okay.
So it was,
okay.
It was that kind of thing that we kind of peaked and kind of started to sell out gigs, at the Marquee and places like that.
Right.
And then the band kind of fell apart, really.
Yeah, it sounds like it just kind of winded down. It wasn't like this huge. There was no big drama or anything, right? It was just kind of this, I mean, it's interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, record labels can certainly play a role in in killing off a band, right? I mean, my God, the way they treat you.
Well, I think the thing the unfortunate thing with us was we were signed to kind of Virgin. We also had our publishing with them, and they'd also assigned us a manager who managed loads of their recording studios. So it was all kind of bizarrely in-house. Mm-hmm. So when we got kind of dropped from their label, it kind of, I think it blunted our manager's enthusiasm for us to a certain degree, because he wanted to manage he wanted us to be, one of these new pop kind of bands or whatever, which we weren't sure that we wanted to be. It was also round about that time where guitar music was coming back into fashion.
Okay.
if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And the label had wanted to push us further in the direction of synth music or whatever,
Okay.
and there was possibly a clash there,
Yeah.
if you know what I mean.
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. At the time, did you assume that that was it? I mean, obviously, like we talked about, you had other projects to move on to, but was it always kind of in the back of your mind that perhaps one day you would resurrect the room, or did you think it was just in your rearview mirror, or were you just kind of focused on what was in front of you going forward?
I think back then I was always focused on what was in front, really, because I think back then the idea that bands like, say, Echo and the Bunnymen would still be going, now kind of thing, and
Right.
still playing the same set, didn't occur to us back then, if you know what I mean, because there didn't seem to be that longevity in our type of music back then.
Right. Right.
Do you, whereas now it seems that it's almost important to consolidate,
Mm-hmm. Oh, I do know. Yeah, I
Does
know.
that make
I know
sense?
exactly what you mean.
In order to make money, anyway. Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. Well, Dave Jackson, this has been wonderful. We're going to begin to wrap up. The time goes quickly. I am going to, however, at the end of our conversation, I'm actually going to play two tracks. I'm going to play Drill Baby Drill, and I'm also going to sneak in Continent of Lies. I think I love both those songs, but I also think they go together, if you know what I mean, as I think we talked about. But before we wrap up, Dave, where's the best place to go online for people to keep up with everything that the Room is doing, so that they can to follow you? Obviously, you have other musical projects as well, but where should people go online?
Well, our record label is 9x9 Records.
Okay.
We've also got a Bandcamp site as the Room, and the Room in the Wood.
Okay.
So the Room and the Room in the Wood Bandcamp, and we've got a Room Facebook page. We haven't actually got a website as such, which we should probably look into.
Yeah. It's good, but yeah, you guys are easy to find. And by the way, Bandcamp, I love Bandcamp. I'm glad you're on there. I always say it's very artist friendly. And what a lot of people don't know too is if you get music from Bandcamp, you get a higher quality file than say if you're just streaming it on YouTube or whatever. So
they tend to be WAV files that we upload down.
Yep. So I'm a big proponent of Bandcamp. So I'm very glad that you're on there. Dave Jackson, thank you again so much. I love the Room. The great band. Like I said, I listened to everything I could find online, and and that's how I know to play these two songs, because I really love both of these, and I love. And I love the messaging and all of it. So keep it up, and I'm sure we'll have you back in the future, because it sounds like you've got a lot coming down the pike. So we'll definitely have you back.
Okay, great. Thanks very much. Cheers.
Absolutely, Dave. Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
You too. Bye.
All right, that was Dave Jackson from The Room, and it was wonderful to talk with him. I'm glad he was a little early, because that way we didn't have to rush. I thought that was a really interesting conversation, and like I said, I became a fast fan of this band. I was not aware of them back in, I might have been a little young to have been aware of them back when they were starting, but like I said, this music to me is timeless, and the lyrical themes of these songs, also timeless. But so we're going to play two songs from The Room. We're going to play the previous single, Drill Baby Drill, and then we're also going to play Continent of Lies, in that order. I think those are both appropriate for the times, whatever time it may be, the present or the past. Like I said, the names and the players change, but a lot of what goes on in the world beneath all of that does not. So here it is, The Room. This song's called Drill Baby Drill.